Oh, recording starting. So today we're going to be talking about resumes and LinkedIn profiles, and I wanted to do this as one of our workshops right in the beginning because, as you guys know, as part of the program, I do review your resume and your LinkedIn profile annually. And even if you're not looking for a job, it's still important for you to have an up-to-date resume and LinkedIn profile. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is important. And what I want to do during this workshop is really go through some of the key points that I have found help build a powerful resume or an effective resume and LinkedIn profile, and then give you guys the opportunity to make any changes that you want to your resume and LinkedIn profile before I review them. And you can take as long as you would like if you want to do, make the updates over a week or two, or if you want to have a couple more weeks to make those updates before you send it to me, completely up to you. But hopefully this will give you some food for thought as you go through that process of updating your resume and your profile. So what makes a resume powerful? What makes a LinkedIn profile powerful? So the first thing I would say is that it documents your competitive advantage. And the way I define your competitive advantage is a combination of your strengths and your experiences. It's basically what makes you different from everyone else who might have similar credentials. So what makes you the person that a company should hire, or what makes you the right person for that opportunity? That's your competitive advantage. The second reason, or the second element that makes a resume or profile powerful is that you're hitting the high points and you're making people interested in knowing more. So they read it and they go, wow, I'd like to get to know this person. He or she looks really interesting. So you're kind of piquing their interest. And the third thing that makes them powerful is that they have legs. And what I mean by that is if you have a good resume and someone reads it, they're going, she may not be the right candidate for this opportunity or this role, but I know I want her in the organization, so let me see if there's another opportunity in the organization for her, and I'm going to pass the resume on to those people. So a resume should be standalone, pretty solid, because it's your marketing tool. Same with a LinkedIn profile. You will occasionally have recruiters or hiring managers look at your profile to determine whether or not you're a candidate that they want to meet with. And so it's important that they represent and kind of document the most important parts of what you bring to the table and your strengths and your experiences. There are a couple assumptions I make when I do a resume review, and I always remind people of these things. So one of the most important things to realize is that your resume, while we do have some traditional formatting that people like, at the end of the day, it should speak to your personality. So it should be based on your style. And I have a different style, as you guys will see as I walk through this material. I probably have a different style than maybe some of the folks that might have given you advice when you were in college, or some of the career counselors or career coaches that you've met since then.
Yeah, it's a coaching thing.
So I am going to mute someone. Sorry, you're being recorded. Just as a note, if you just joined the call, I am recording this call. So there are a couple different styles to talk about. The first is functional versus chronological. So chronological is the more standard type of resume. It's where you do most recent to least recent on your resume. Functional is where you group things by category. So instead of doing your work experience through, starting with your most recent to your least recent, you would just say, okay, here's all my experience as a project manager, here's all my experience as a leader, and you would just group those like experiences together. But the order, the font, your objective, all of those things can be different. Some people call them an objective, some people call it a summary, some people call it a goal. I mean, some of that is really up to you in terms of personalizing it. And so you want to make sure it aligns to your style. And you also probably want to check and see what people in your industry might think of. As you guys know, I have an engineering background, so I'm kind of familiar with what people do in that industry. And then I also work in financial services, so I know what resumes look like in that industry. And it can differ a little bit, right? So a marketing resume may look different than a more technical engineering resume. So those are just some things you want to consider. The second thing that people often don't realize is that a recruiter and even hiring managers typically are only going to read the first 1/3 of your resume. So that top 1/3 on the first page is really what they're going to read and decide whether or not they're going to read it, the rest of it or not. So imagine 3 seconds. In about 3 seconds, someone is going to decide whether or not they're going to read your whole resume or whether or not they're going to move on. And so it's really important that you organize your resume in order of importance, and that the key things that will grab people's attention are up at the top. So I'm now going to start kind of going through the order of a resume. And the first thing that a traditional resume has is something called the objective. And what I have done is, just through kind of tweaking my own resume, I've come up with a formula for writing that objective that I feel like is a better use of space and a better way of describing what my objective is. So on the top of this page, you see just an example I pulled actually from the internet of a traditional objective. So sometimes people will say something like, I'm seeking a senior position in the financial services industry, focusing on operational management and process improvement. And that would be a very traditional way of writing your objective. The way that I now write a similar objective would be something along the lines of experienced leader in the financial services industry, seeking opportunity in operational management and process improvement, where I can use my problem solving and leadership skills to meet business objectives. So what do you guys see as being the differences between the top statement and the bottom statement? You can unmute yourself, or you can use the chat, whichever you prefer to answer that question. No one's unmuting?
I think the new is more specific, right? I think the tradition is very generic, I would say.
Okay. That's good.
I was going to say this, the new type is more detailed.
Okay. There's more information in it. Any other comments? Okay, so a couple things that I'll highlight on this, and actually I'll use the next slide. So what you can see in the gray color is kind of the pieces that I'm going to highlight. So what you see in that first column, or that first piece, that first phrase, is a description of who I am, or who this person was, because I picked a random person and this isn't mine. But you can basically see that I've transformed it into, you're describing yourself, and then in the second, you're describing the type of role you're looking for. In the third, you're talking about the skills that you bring. And the fourth, you're saying the impact that you have or that you want to have. And so by taking this kind of formula, not only are you telling people what kind of position that you're seeking, but you're also starting to hint at why they should hire you and what you bring to the table. So I'm going to go through it element by element, and there are these little numbers up here to kind of show you what piece is which. So for number one, you're basically describing yourself using an adjective and a noun. So on the handout that you can get from the website, what I recommend doing is just brainstorming different adjectives that describe you. Brainstorm different nouns that describe you. And then you're just going to try different combinations until you have one that you feel really represents who you are and what you bring to the table. In the second piece, you're talking about the type of role you're looking for. So what type of function or what type of area you want to work in. So that's fairly straightforward. Typically, you might say engineering. You might say engineering in or nuclear engineering or engineering in a nuclear plant. You're just going to design that to be very specific to the type of role that you're looking for. In the third section, you're talking about the skills that you want to highlight. So again, brainstorm all the different skills and strengths that you have, and then pick which two you want to highlight in that objective sentence. And the last one is, what impact will you have? So as a result of your experience and your skills, what kind of impact do you bring to the organization? So it could be business objectives, it could be outstanding customer or client experience, it could be lower cost. And that's where you want to think about, what is it that you really want to impact, what's important to you. It could be clean energy, it could be sustainability. What kind of impact do you want to have in the world? And that's kind of a nice place that you can put that. Does this make sense in terms of this objective? Are there any questions? And just as a reminder, if you want to unmute yourself, you should see a little microphone button with an X through it. You just need to click that. Any comments or questions on the objective? All right. So did I move too fast? I did. So coming up next is the summary and profile. And this is an area of your resume that comes right after the objective. So if you look at that 1/3 rule, 1/3 of your resume is basically going to be the objective and then this piece. And that's going to be the top of your resume that you're going to use to grab people's attention. So in this section, what you're really doing is highlighting 5 to 7 key competencies. These are key capabilities that you have that you bring to the table. These are your competitive advantage. And what you're going to do with those is use some specific experiences or accomplishments to demonstrate how you have used those capabilities to make a difference in the past. And it could be things like, from a process improvement, sometimes you're talking about efficiency, you're talking about throughput, you're talking about reduced cost, program project management, what are the key deliverables there, meeting requirements, stakeholder management, satisfied customers, leadership, how many people have you supervised, that kind of thing. So these are the 4 that I have on my resume. The reason I only have 4 is because I have a lot more sub-bullets to them, but you can just as easily do 5 to 7 with just 1 or 2 lines for each one that gives an example of how you've used them. And those are threads, if you will, or themes that you're going to see, or somebody who reads your resume is going to see throughout your resume. These are consistent. And one of the things I will point out is whatever your key competencies are, these are the same key competencies that should be over in your LinkedIn profile. People should not see different branding between your resume and your LinkedIn profile. They are both pieces that market you, and so they should be consistent in their messaging. Imagine if you saw a commercial on TV for a product and then you went to their website and they were marketing it completely different. It would be very confusing to you to try and figure out which was real. And so you really want to be focused in terms of identifying what your competitive advantage is, what your brand is, and making sure that those are the same everywhere, whether it's LinkedIn, your resume, your cover letter, that you're reinforcing that, because that will make it much easier on a hiring manager or somebody, a mentor, or anyone that you're working with to understand who you are and what it is that you're looking for and what you bring to the table. So the next section after that is where you start talking about your experience. One of the things you can do as you continue through your career is you can actually change the title of this from professional or work experience to relevant experience. And what this allows you to do is remove experiences that do not directly relate to the job that you are applying for or the job that you are considering as your next target role. Generally speaking, in this day and age, most people will say that your resume should probably be in the neighborhood of 2 pages. And so a lot of times you're going to decide to take experiences off that are not relevant to the role that you're applying for. This can also include experiences that are more than 15 years old. Some people will actually say more than 10 years old. It shouldn't be on your resume. When you're doing your relevant experience, one of the important things is to make sure your bullets are parallel and that they start with action verbs. You can actually Google action verbs or power verbs, and it will give you a laundry list of them that you can use. You want to make sure you're not using the same words a lot. Sometimes people will say things like, responsible for blah, 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 responsible for blah, 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 and they'll use the same words over and over again in their resume. So in terms of the verbs, try and, use a couple different ones just so that it reads a little bit better. You also want to make sure you have a similar number of bullets for each role. You don't want one position having 12 bullets and the next position having 3. They should all be in the same range, probably I would say 5 to 7. And those bullets should focus not only on what your responsibilities were, which you can always get those from your job description, but also what your accomplishments were. What did you do for the organization? What did you do for your clients? What did you do for your business? What kind of impact have you had in your role? What are your key accomplishments? What would people say that you have done in the role that might maybe made you shine a little bit brighter than your peers? And then you also want to talk about the skills that you've developed or the knowledge that you've developed. So think in terms of transferable skills, skills that you can take from that role and apply to a different role. Those are the other things that you want to highlight in your relevant experience bullets. And then depending on how long you've been at a company, it is possible to do it a couple different ways. If you've been working at one company your entire career, you can break it out by different roles. Or if you worked, you've changed jobs every year and a half, but you've only changed companies 3 times, you might decide to group by companies. That, again, is a matter of preference in terms of how you want your resume to look. All right, so then I'm going to move us to the next section, which is skills and education. So at this point, you guys can see that I'm really targeting how you organize your resume to people who have work experience, because when you were graduating from college and you went and saw the Career Center, they probably told you that your skills and education should come up higher in your resume. And that's because as a graduating senior from college, your education is actually the most important part of your experience. Now that you've been out of school for a while, your education is a little bit less important, and what's more important is the knowledge and skills that you've developed. So it's a little later in your resume, but it's still an important piece. I break down my education in a couple different ways. So one is I include technology and soft skills, and I actually title it technology, and then I write down my technology skills. Some are a given in this day and age, like for the types of roles that you and I are probably applying for. Microsoft Office is kind of a given skill set, but you want to make sure that you're highlighting any other technology tools that you're familiar with that they might be looking for. So, for example, in industrial engineering, there's a simulation tool called Arena. And that might be one that you would put on your resume if you wanted people to be aware that you can use it. If you're a project manager, you probably want to talk about project, because not everybody knows how to use that. There might just be specific tools that are important to your profession and you just want to mention that you have them. Under soft skills, I do not call them soft skills. On my resume, I actually call them competencies. I list some of the skill sets that I have. So, for example, I talk about problem solving, talk about project management. I have a Six Sigma Green Belt, so I mentioned that. And I mentioned some of my capabilities. So, virtual team leadership, global intercultural competencies, language skills are on my resume. So if you're fluent or proficient in another language, you definitely want to mention that as well. And then I also list StrengthsFinder. So if you are familiar with StrengthsFinder, then you know that it gives you 5 strengths, and I actually list those on my resume. And the reason I do that is because a lot of companies are now using StrengthsFinder with their employees. And I actually had an interview 2 years ago where I had StrengthsFinder with my strengths on there. And when I was brought in for the interview, the hiring manager actually said something along the lines of, we really wanted to meet the person who had this strength with this strength, because they just thought it was curious and they wanted to see how it played out in a personality, I guess. So StrengthsFinder is one of those things that's becoming more common. More people are recognizing it. So if you have taken it, I would recommend listing your strengths on there. If somebody sees it and is not familiar with it, they're going to ask you what it is, and that's a great opportunity or a great lead-in to talking about your strengths and what you're good at. So either way, I think it's a win-win. Now that you've been out of school for a number of years, your GPA is not that important. So, I mean, if you're really proud of your GPA and you want to share that you got a 4.0 in your undergrad, by all means, feel free to leave it in. But about 3 or 4 years out of school, you pretty much don't need to include your GPA anymore. And then last but not least, if you have any certifications or certificates, definitely mention those. So like I have a certificate in developing leadership talent, and I have a business coaching certificate and Six Sigma certification. So I list those in my skills and education as well. That part might have seemed fairly straightforward, so I'm going to go to the next one. And this is the other section. So this is where you get to kind of decide what you want to show. I am a big believer that someone who is looking to hire a person to join their team or trying to help someone find a new opportunity, that at the end of the day, it comes down to that personal connection. They're going to see lots of resumes of people who are capable of doing the job. But at the end of the day, the decision on who gets the offer is also going to be based on, do I like this person and do I want to work with them for 40 hours every week? Because honestly, we probably see the people at work more often than we see anyone else in our lives. And so it's nice to know that you're working with people that share common interests or that you just get along well with and that you'll enjoy working with. So I actually use this section on my resume to tell people a little bit about myself. I do have my awards on there because I've been blessed to be recognized by the Society of Women Engineers with some awards, and even at work with some awards. And so I do include those on my resume. But the interest in the volunteer, I think, is really important because it helps people know what's important to you, and it can really help build a relationship or a connection during your interview. For me, as some of you know, I am in the process of starting a animal rescue in Charlotte. And so I have that on my resume, and people will often go, "Oh, you're doing that? Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing." And it's just a way of connecting with people. You will get mixed answers on this. Some people will say nobody cares about what you do in your personal time, so leave it off your resume. And then some people like me say, no, I do care because I want to like the people I work with, and it's just another way of connecting to them. So this is one of those places where you get to make a decision, a personal decision on what you want to do. I do want to talk a little bit about the volunteer as well. So especially early in my career, and this might be true for some of you, I was heavily involved in different professional organizations, and that was how I was developing skills that I could then show my current employer, actually, that I had developed so that they would consider me for a new opportunity. And so a lot of times those kinds of experiences, rather than putting them down at the bottom under volunteer, you would want to move them up to that relevant experience section. So if you have some experiences that you really feel make you well equipped for a role, so for example, maybe in a nonprofit or in a professional society, you've been leading a virtual global team for a couple of years, and the role that you want to be considered for is to be a project manager of a global project. You could probably pull some really good bullets and summarize your experiences really well based off that volunteer experience, so that you could help people understand that you've already developed some of those skills and they could be leveraged in that new opportunity. In which case, instead of putting it down here in the volunteer, you could actually move it up into the relevant experience and put, whatever your volunteer title is, with the name of the organization and, you know, a couple bullets that describe what you've developed and what you've accomplished.
They do.
Is someone about to ask a question? If you are, it's totally fine. Now's a good time.
I wanted to make a comment. You know, I think that what you say is true about some people that really, you know, like some people don't care about what you do, like how you volunteer. But I think it's important, and sometimes I feel like kind of like insecure about what I put there, but I think that that shows a lot about what I care and what's important to me. Because a lot of times I just want a job, but honestly, it's not so much about getting a job, but really they know what's important to me, or my values, and what I value in my life. So I think that's a good thing that I never thought about.
That's great feedback, Ed. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, for me, if someone, if I am going to find the kind of manager that I want to work for, and the company that I'd like to be part of, I want it to align to my values, and I want them to understand what's important to me and what motivates me. And this is just part of how you can help start presenting that picture. So completely agree. Were you going to add something, Ed?
No,
Okay.
thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. So before I move on to LinkedIn profiles, I just wanted to pause and kind of go through a couple hints that I had thrown out throughout the whole discussion. But the first is around keywords. And actually, I don't remember if I had talked about keywords already, but many companies use these huge databases to keep your resumes. And a typical hiring process at a fairly large company is that you submit your resume through a website, or even if you submit it to a person, it ends up with HR. The job of HR is to go through the resume and make sure you meet the minimum requirements. The minimum requirements in a job posting are typically titled required or minimum qualifications. Required skills or minimum qualifications. Those are the two that I see most common. And in that section is a list of things that, in theory, an HR recruiter is not supposed to let a resume pass them that does not meet all those minimum requirements. And this is part of equal opportunity laws and some other stuff. So in a big company, that HR person is going to look at your resume and they're going to say, okay, they're looking for 5 years of project management experience. Let me look at this resume. Can I tell that they have 5 years of experience? And they're basically going to go down the list and check it off. You want to make that process as easy as possible for the HR person, because they may or may not understand what it is that you're doing. So to use an example, if my resume says that I have 5 years of experience in total quality management, I'm using this as an example, and the qualification that they're looking for is 5 years of experience in process improvement. Those two skills are actually, in many cases, very close, and it might actually meet the qualification. But because the words are different, that HR manager may not know that. So you really want to make sure the language you're using, the keywords, are the appropriate ones, because if it doesn't look like you meet those qualifications, they're not going to pass your resume on to the hiring manager, who probably does know that those two things might be equivalent for the job that you're applying for. So keywords, how do you figure out what the keywords are? One way is by looking at job postings. So my recommendation typically to folks who are beginning a real career search and getting ready to start applying for a new role is that you go out on Indeed.com, which if you guys aren't familiar with it, it pulls job postings from every other site and puts them in one place. So you can go to Indeed.com, type in your ideal target job. It doesn't matter if it's in the right city or not, but just pull up 5, 6 job postings and start scanning them and highlighting, like print them out, highlight them, the skills that they're looking for, and look for what the common themes are between those 5 job postings for a quality engineer or for a project manager. And the words that you see over and over again as those key qualifications, go back to your resume and see whether or not you use that terminology. If you have the experience that they're looking for, then make sure you're using the words that they have. If you don't have the experiences and you're seeing it, a couple of times on those job postings, then we need to have a conversation about how you can leverage some of the stuff that you've done to fill that gap, or whether or not you might need to invest in an in-between experience or something else in order to fill that gap. But keywords are important. The second thing is have as many people as you can review your resume, because as I said, it's a style document. Everyone has a slightly different style. So have lots of people review it, but make sure that once you get their feedback that you make the decision on whether or not you make changes based on your style, because you're going to get contradictory feedback and you just need to pick at the end of the day which one you feel best represents you, and that's perfectly okay. So hopefully those are just some little tips to help make your resume as strong as possible. And I'm going to pause now for any questions or any comments, and then I will talk briefly about LinkedIn profiles. So questions or comments?
One quick question about the Strengths Finder that you were talking about earlier. This is something that you do online?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. It can be. You can also buy the book. But if you Google Strengths Finder, it'll take you to Gallup's website, and I think you can, I know you can buy a code and take it right then and there online.
Okay. That was my question, because I think I have the book too, so I just wanted to make sure that I was looking at the right thing.
Yeah, it can be a book.
Jennifer, the book that you recommended, the A Foolish Bucket, it also provides a code, a free code to take the test to find your strength. So, yeah, that's pretty useful. I think, because I can take it again if I want to. So I took it a long time ago. So, but yeah, that was a cool thing that that book came also with the Strength Finder test.
Yeah, there are a couple of books that come with it. I think the one thing I'll point out is that there's 2 versions of the test. And so if you buy an older book, then you get the 1.0 version of the Strength Finder. If you buy, I think it's Strength Finder 2.0, you get the newer version of the assessment. The assessment itself is not different. What's different is how the report looks when it gives you your top 5. So it's not a significant difference on which one you take. The report just looks slightly different or contains some different content depending on the version you take. But it's something I highly recommend that everyone do, because it just gives you a way of answering that question of what are your strengths. If you're not sure what they are, it gives you kind of a hint of what they could be, and then you can start looking at your experiences and some of the things that you've done to confirm that those are your strengths, and also to be able to provide evidence or accomplishments that link to those strengths. So I'm going to move into LinkedIn profiles next. And there's so much information out there on LinkedIn.com. I know that there are people who have made a living just helping people build LinkedIn profiles. I am not one of those people. I am very simple and to the point with LinkedIn. I look at my profile as being a quick marketing tool for myself, but it's not the be-all, end-all of my marketing. So if you guys go out and look at my LinkedIn profile, you're going to see it's pretty short and sweet. But there are other styles and there are some resources on LinkedIn that you can certainly use. What I like about LinkedIn and the reason that I'm active on it is because it's a great way of being able to see your network and see who you're connected to. So as you are trying to build your network, you can actually, for example, if let's say one of your target companies is Tesla, you would love to work for Tesla. You can actually do a search in LinkedIn and type in Tesla, and it will tell you who knows somebody at Tesla. And that can be a really handy way of strategically building your network, because you can then reach out to that person and say, hey, hey, Jennifer, I saw that you know somebody who works at Tesla. Would you mind making an introduction for me? That is my dream company. I would love to learn more about the company and how I might be able to one day get a role or a job there. So you can definitely use LinkedIn as a source for networking. There are some cautions around network or around LinkedIn. I personally am a big believer that you should only connect to people that you know and connect to people that you can speak to. Meaning, if I connect to someone, I want to be able to tell someone who asks me a little bit about that person. So I should actually know them to some degree. That doesn't mean that I know their entire biography, but I should be able to say, oh yeah, I know Ed. He graduated from UNC Charlotte with a civil degree in 2010, right? So you should be able to know a little snippet about each of those people. They shouldn't be complete strangers to you. So what I do is I look for small things that I can do to keep my LinkedIn profile looking fresh. And I'm a big believer that you should spend 5 to 10 minutes a week on LinkedIn. What this looks like for me, honestly, is I have LinkedIn on my phone. And when I'm waiting for the elevator, I'll, get on LinkedIn and just look at what's going on, congratulate people on new jobs, respond to emails on LinkedIn. But I just try to be on there a couple of times during the week so that I'm responding to people who send me emails through LinkedIn. I do know people who get on LinkedIn like every 3 or 4 months, and they'll find out that somebody sent them an email 3 months ago about an opportunity that has since expired. So that's one of the reasons I think it's a good idea just to spend a couple minutes every week on LinkedIn. So this is my my approach to LinkedIn. The first thing is keep your picture professional, because when you get on LinkedIn, one of the first things you see on anyone's profile is their picture. So use a professionally taken photograph. If you live in Charlotte, or probably even if you live outside of Charlotte, you can pretty much always find a Groupon for JCPenney or for the Picture People, for some of these professional photographers. And it's like $15, and they'll take your picture in a suit. They'll take a couple different poses. You can pick the pictures that you want to keep. They'll put them on a CD or DVD for you. And then you've got a couple nice pictures of yourself that you can use for things like LinkedIn. But definitely use a professional picture. A couple of reasons why. One is you look a lot better in a professional picture than you do in a normal picture, just because of the lighting and the fact that they really know what they're doing. It also is more professional, because a lot of times I've seen people use pictures from their wedding and they're like cropping themselves. And that just looks odd, because people can tell that you're dressed up for something. Or the one where you can see someone's hand on the person's shoulder, that looks a little awkward as well. So it's just nice to have a professionally taken photo, and they're not expensive. So that's my recommendation. My second recommendation is don't use your job for your tagline. And what I'm referring to is your tagline is, I think in LinkedIn terms, they call it your headline. But basically, it's what shows up right after your name. So a lot of people will put their job in there. And my recommendation is don't put your job in there. Instead, pull bits and pieces from that objective statement that you created and create a phrase that sums up who you are and what you do. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile, it does not say engineer or whatever my current business title is. Instead, it says something like strategic problem solver and success advocate. I think that's what it currently says. So it tells people a little bit about who I am and what's important to me. And so I highly recommend that you do that. One, because in the event that something happens job-wise, you don't have to change that unless you really want to. And when people are looking at you, they get a strong sense of what you do, not just what your job title is. And then the third hint is in LinkedIn, the way it's set up, you have the ability to just do a summary section. And what I do is I literally copy paste the summary from my resume into the summary of my LinkedIn profile, and I use that as my core LinkedIn profile. Underneath there, I just list my jobs and the year that I've held them, the years that I've held them, and it prevents me from having to spend a lot of time continuously updating my resume because I really just focus on updating my summary section in the LinkedIn profile. If you do those three things, you'll be amazed at how professional your profile looks. You can still go in and add different things later. I mean, you can add, groups that you're part of. You can add your education. That's really important. You can add publications and other achievements and awards, and they even have a section now for volunteer organizations. You can go in and slowly add those pieces, but if you start with this, you'll have a really good profile as a beginning place. And that way you can start connecting to people that you know and maybe have not stayed in touch with. So I talked a little bit about some of these, and test your resume. The same thing is also true for LinkedIn. Just make sure that you're using the right keywords and that you are hitting the high points of what you bring to the table and kind of what your superpower or your competitive advantage is. Make sure that the branding between your resume and LinkedIn is consistent. And, I think I've covered all this. Oh, so one thing I did want to talk about is on your resume. A lot of people will have different versions of their resume if they're looking at different kinds of target jobs. And so what you really want to do is make sure that if you are tweaking your resume for different types of jobs, that you're not changing it completely, because your resume, if it's doing its job, might have legs and it may end up in a different place, and you want to make sure that it's still very representative of you and your skills. But also you want to make sure that you're showing all of your capabilities. So one of the examples I use, when I was interviewing for the job that I currently have, the job description did not say everything that this role was really about. And that's not that unusual, right? A lot of hiring managers are really busy and they use the template job description for that job role, even though what they're looking for might be slightly different than that. They put it out there, they get the resumes, they start looking through the resumes, and they're looking for something that they haven't actually even said that they're looking for. And because I keep my resume very consistent, all I do is I reorder things based on what I'm applying for. I still have the other stuff that I'm capable of doing on my resume. And it turned out that the skill set that she was looking for was something on my resume because I hadn't taken it off. So I really recommend to folks that instead of removing things from your resume that you reorder. Always want to put the most important towards the top to least important, but don't remove any of your core capabilities, because at the end of the day, it might be that actually gives you the competitive advantage against somebody else who's being considered for the same role. And your resume should be updated at least quarterly, and you should be checking on your LinkedIn profile about quarterly as well, just to make sure it looks good. So that's really it for the formal presentation. As I kind of reminded you guys at the beginning, part of the program is that I do a resume review and a LinkedIn profile review. So at this point, what I ask is You are welcome to send me your resume whenever you feel like it is ready to be reviewed. Just send it to me at my email address and I will take a look at it. And then the next time we chat, I can give you feedback, or I can send you the feedback based on email or through email. When you send me your resume, also let me know that your LinkedIn profile is good to go, and I'll go in and take a look at that as well, because I want to provide you some feedback, and hopefully you guys will find that useful and helpful in terms of making sure that it really shows the best parts of you. I do a lot of resume reviews, and I will tell you that the thing I see most often is that people don't do a good enough job of highlighting who they are, what they've achieved, and what their capabilities are. And so it just doesn't show how amazing these people are. And so that's a lot of times the feedback people get from me is you need to highlight the things you do better. In any case, I open the floor for questions now, if you have any.
Jennifer, so you say that to spend between 5 and 10 minutes a week on LinkedIn?
Yes.
That seems too little or not too much. I mean, I spend more time on Facebook, honestly.
Well, so Facebook's different than LinkedIn, right? Facebook you're doing because you like to do it. I think LinkedIn is, so 5 to 10 minutes if you are not actively in a career search is plenty. If you are in a career search, you should be spending way more time, probably at least an hour a week. If you're getting ready to look for your new job and you're actively trying to build your network. But if you're just like me right now, where it's really just about maintaining relationships, I can do that in about 10 minutes a week. I don't see that much, and it might be me and my network, but I don't see that much activity from folks in my network that I need more than 10 minutes. I have a friend who's in sales, and she spends 5 minutes a day.
Yeah. Now, you also say that you can connect. So on LinkedIn, it will tell you how you are connected to a certain person.
Yes.
And how you can introduce, how your friend can help introduce you to that person. How do you know that? Is that, you know how that works?
I do. So let me actually pull up LinkedIn, and then I will share it. Once it actually comes up. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen right now. So you're seeing my LinkedIn profile, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it really is as simple as typing in Tesla. I'm just using that as an example. And what you can see is that I actually know someone who works for Tesla, and I know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who have our second connections, which means that I know somebody who works with somebody at Tesla, their second connections. But you just have to type it up here, whatever company you're looking for. So SPX is another company, and similarly, you can see I know a couple people who know somebody else, so they're second connections. Does that make sense? Ed, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right, I hear silence. Or wait, maybe I have a chat. I have chats. All right, here we go. So I'm gonna just share a little some chats here. So one person is suggesting that for volunteering, they include volunteering roles that are related to the job that they're applying for. Should they expand it to others non-work related items? Whenever you're adding something to your resume, my recommendation is you include anything that is transferable to a professional role. So if what you're doing involves leading teams, communications, any of those transferable skills that are applicable to your job, I would include them. They don't have to just be the professional role, or I'm sorry, the professional leadership roles. They could be, volunteering at the Humane Society, even if it is developing a skill that's transferable. And for LinkedIn in regards to the jobs, so the question is, what about jobs that don't relate to a new opportunity? Should everything be on LinkedIn? There are mixed responses on that. Some people will say you should put everything on LinkedIn. LinkedIn should be even more complete than your resume because there's no length limit to LinkedIn. And my recommendation would be, yes, go ahead and put everything on LinkedIn that represents who you are, the skills that you have, the capabilities that you can bring to your next opportunity. You don't have to do it all at once, but just slowly as you're filling things in, I would recommend putting all your jobs on LinkedIn, whether or not they are the same kind of job function or role that you're currently in or will be looking for. Any other questions? Did I answer? I think I answered everyone's questions that I got sent. But if not, if I didn't answer it completely, please feel free to send me an email. You can also comment on the website, and I will go in and respond to comments there. So you're welcome to do that as well. It's almost time to be up anyway, so I just want to thank you guys for your time. Thanks for interacting with me on the call, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you all again soon. Meanwhile, just feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, you too.